economics and business administration. Reports are a little mixed on what Osama studied and if he actually earned any degrees. Bin Laden left the university in 1979 and went to Pakistan to help fight against the Soviet Union and their war in Afghanistan. From 1979 to 1989, the U.S. provided financial aid and weapons to the Mujahideen rebels against the Soviets. The program was called Operation Cyclone. The U.S. didn't train and arm the rebels directly. This was done by Pakistan's Inter-Services Intelligence Agency, known as ISI, and Pakistan's armed forces. Bin Laden developed a relationship with Hamid Gul, the head of the ISI. By 1984, Bin Laden had established a group called Maktab al-Khidmat, which funneled money, arms, and fighters from around the Arab world into Afghanistan. Bin Laden also established camps inside Pakistan that he used to train volunteer fighters against the Soviet-backed government of Afghanistan. In 1988, Bin Laden split from Maktab al-Khidmat over operational differences between himself and Abdullah Azam, the co-founder of the group. Azam wanted to play a support role in the Afghanistan war, while Osama wanted a larger military one. Bin Laden also wanted the Arab fighters to be separate from the regular Afghanistan rebels and not have them integrated into their forces. At this time, he formed al-Qaeda as his organized Islamic faction. Its goal was to lift the word of Allah and to make his religion victorious. They were also to take up jihadist cases after the Soviet withdrawal from Afghanistan. The Soviets left Afghanistan in February of 1989, and Osama bin Laden went back home to Saudi Arabia as a hero of jihad, who with his Arab Legion had brought down the mighty Soviet Union. Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait on August 2, 1990. This action put the ruling house of Saud at risk. Bin Laden met with King Fahd and the Saudi defense minister. He advised them not to depend on non-Muslims from the U.S. and others. He offered to defend Saudi Arabia with his military expertise. They declined his offer and invited U.S. troops into the country to defend them. Osama then publicly denounced Saudi Arabia and their dependence on U.S. forces, saying that the presence of foreign troops in the land of the two mosques profaned sacred soil. Mecca and Medina are the two most sacred sites in the Islamic religion, and both reside in Saudi Arabia. Bin Laden continued criticism of the Saudi government, and this would lead to his banishment. In 1992, he then went to Sudan in a brokered deal with the help of Ali Muhammad. Ali was one of his al-Qaeda operatives and was one of the links in the chain of the first attack on the World Trade Center in 1993. The FBI seized documents from the New Jersey home of El Sayed Nasir, an associate of Ali Muhammad, which had evidence of terrorist plots against the U.S., specifically blowing up New York skyscrapers. Nasser would go on to be convicted of connections in the 1993 World Trade Center bombings and the murder of Rabbi Meir Kahane in New York on November 5, 1990. In Sudan, bin Laden established a new base for his operations in Khartoum. He continued to speak out against the Saudi government. In response, King Fahd of Saudi Arabia sent an emissary to Sudan on March 5, 1994, demanding bin Laden's passport. Also, Osama's family would cut off his $7 million a year stipend that he was receiving. Al-Qaeda was strongly associated with the Egyptian Islamic Jihad. In 1995, they tried to assassinate Hosni Mubarak, the president of Egypt, but failed. The group would be expelled from Sudan and Egypt. At this point, the Sudan government was trying to find ways to expel him from the country. They even offered him to the CIA, but the Clinton administration would not take custody of him because they felt they had no legal reason to detain him because there was no indictment against him at that time. The Saudis wanted him out of Sudan and didn't want him in their country. The discussions on what to do with him continued until Osama would leave the country in May of 1996 and go back to Afghanistan, where he would develop a relationship with their Taliban leader, Mullah Muhammad Omar, in Mayer el-Sharif, Afghanistan. Osama sent hundreds of Afghan and Arab fighters to help the Taliban to defeat the group of 5,000 to 6,000 Hazaras fighters that were overrunning the city. In February of 1998, Osama bin Laden and his second-in-command, Ayum al-Zawahiri, co-signed a fatwa in the name of the World Islamic Front for Jihad against Jews and Crusaders. They stated that killing North Americans and their allies was an individual duty for every Muslim, and to liberate the Al-Aqsa Mosque, also known as the Dome on the Rock in Jerusalem, and the Holy Mosque in Mecca, Saudi Arabia, from the grip of their enemies. On August 7, 1998, bin Laden orchestrated the simultaneous truck bombings of U.S. embassies in Tanzania and Kenya. After this, the FBI put bin Laden on their top 10 most wanted list. Another bin Laden attack was scheduled for January 3, 2000, but was undone by the arrest of Ahmed Rassam, one of the terrorists involved. The plan intended bombings on the Radisson SAS Hotel in Jordan, the killing of terrorists at Mount Nebo and at the Jordan River, as well as attempting to sink the U.S. destroyer the Sullivans, which was in port at Yemen at the time. The Jordanian terrorist cell was arrested, and they sank the explosive-filled skiff that was to be used in the attack. It was also discovered that they were planning to hit another target in the U.S. On September 11, 2001, bin Laden's Al-Qaeda would successfully attack targets in the United States. 19 hijackers would take over and crash 4 airliners. 3 would hit their targets. The 4th would crash before it could hit its target, due to the passengers attempting to take control of the airplane from the terrorist. By the end of the day, nearly 3,000 people were killed, and the nation was in a state of shock and disbelief. New York's Twin Towers had fallen from the planes crashing into them, and some conspiracy theories suggest that the buildings were taken down by a controlled demolition of the buildings. A section of the Pentagon in Virginia was a burnt and crumbling mess from the plane loaded with fuel smashing into it. Again, conspiracy theorists would have an alternate view of events, suggesting a missile of some type was used. A smoldering field in Pennsylvania would be testament to the bravery of those who stood up to the terrorists at the cost of their own lives. Osama bin Laden would now become public enemy number 1. Osama would initially deny involvement in the September 11th attacks, although the U.S. government's intelligence agencies had proof. Muslim extremists like to use propaganda. Bin Laden wanted to give the impression that the U.S. was targeting him for no reason. He would eventually admit to his involvement in 2004, and by 2006, Al Jazeera, the Arabic news channel, would show a video of bin Laden discussing preparations for the attack with 2 of the hijackers. Osama was known to be in Afghanistan, and the U.S. demanded that the Taliban government give him up. The Taliban refused, and the U.S. launched a war into Afghanistan to get Osama and remove the Taliban from power. Initially, the U.S. would rely heavily upon Afghanistan warlords for the bulk of its troops against the Taliban. The Taliban would quickly be removed from power, but the fight to regain power would not end. The closest the U.S. would come to getting bin Laden would be at Tora Bora on August of 2001. Intelligence would surface that suggested a meeting of Al-Qaeda in their cave complex at Tora Bora, Afghanistan. The U.S. and Afghan forces began their assault on the compound on August 14, 2001. By August 16th, the battle was over, but Osama had slipped away due to a lack of U.S. troops and being drawn into fake truces, which allowed bin Laden time to flee the battle. Bin Laden's trail would basically grow cold. He would release statements and video from time to time, letting people know he was still around. The best intel the U.S. was getting said bin Laden was moving across the border to Pakistan and staying in tribal areas where the Pakistani government had little control. Pakistan had been cooperating with the U.S., but publicly stated that it would not let U.S. troops operate in their country. Pakistan is an Islamic country, and many Muslims sympathize with Osama bin Laden as a great Islamic warrior, fighting the great Satan of America. In August of 2010, U.S. intelligence would track one of Osama's couriers to a large 3-story complex near Abbottabad, Pakistan. On October 18, 2010, an unnamed NATO official claimed that bin Laden was alive and well, and living comfortably in Pakistan, and that he was being protected by elements of the Pakistani intelligence services. Most, if not all, of this statement would be confirmed on May 1, 2011, when during Operation Neptune Spear, Navy SEAL Team 6 and other special forces raided the Abbottabad compound and found bin Laden. Bin Laden was hiding less than a mile from Pakistan's military academy in a populated